Folks, you will not believe how much you save at MyPillow.com when you use the code ERIC.
Yay!
Thanks.
Hey there, folks. It's the Eric Metaxas Show. As you know, on this program, one of the things we like to do is talk to people about their lives, especially if those lives are particularly interesting, with an emphasis on redemptive. I have a guest today, Barbara Cueto, who's written a book called From Mafia Princess to God's Princess. I'm just thrilled to have you here, Barbara. Welcome.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
You lean a little further forward because I want to make sure we catch every syllable.
Okay.
Your story, I don't know where to start. You had a very, very tough life, maximum craziness. Where should we start? Where did you grow up? What city did you grow up in?
I grew up in El Paso, Texas, and for the most part, and a border town. My father is Irish. My mother is Mexican, so there was a lot of drinking and a lot of temper. At 7 years old, I was born into an alcoholic family, and it really was not. It was terrible to grow up that way, and there was a lot of distractions. There was a lot of chaos, so that when I was 7 years old, I was hurt by a neighbor. I was sexually abused by a neighbor, and it happened.
You were 7.
I was 7. I was playing on the sidewalk, writing words that I'd heard my father use frequently, and while other kids were drawing hopscotch sketches, I was I had figured out these they were only 4 letters long, so
very easy to chalk.
Yeah, and so a neighbor came up and started asking me about it, and then he invited me to his home, where he stole everything from me, and my innocence, my purity, my eyes were opened like in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve's were when they discovered the tree.
At 7 years old, were you able to tell your parents about this?
No. Sexual abuse it's a crime, and that's not too soft or hard of a word.
Not even close.
It is a crime, and it is one of shame. It's one that you don't want to tell anyone that you're not who you were before. That now you're 7 years old and your eyes have been opened, and you just want to cover yourself with fig leaves, only you cover yourself with lies.
I mean, it is an amazing thing, right? Because the most normal thing would be to run and tell people, but something happens. I think this is why we know that the sexual abuse, particularly of children, is nothing less than evil itself.
That's right.
Because it does something. As you just said, it robs you of innocence. Did this continue? Was this a one-time thing?
Well, interestingly enough, and I don't know why that is, it seems that you're tagged after that. And or maybe it's just rampant that much. But it seemed to me like I was somehow tagged. It did continue with this neighbor. A lot of that has been blocked out. When I wrote my book, I think God had his purpose for having me do it at the time I did, because those are things that you really try to forget. Your mind forgets those things. It doesn't want to go back and look at things, but I think that God gives you the ability to look back and use it for his glory and not hurt you anymore. It has no power anymore.
As a father of a daughter, just even hearing about this,
Yes.
it's just very tough.
And so your daughter's beautiful.
And this went on, thank you. So this went on for years, and it's hard to fathom what this would do to the heart and soul and mind of a little girl. I hardly want to think of it because it's so evil.
No, it is evil, and the fact is that was introduced into my home through abuse, through alcohol abuse, and maybe some drug abuse, but not through my mother's side, but through my father. And let me just say right now that my father changed, and that was a miracle. It's miracle Monday.
He eventually changed. But before you go to that part, what do you mean?
Yeah, I'm
you
not going to rush ahead, but I'm going to say that evil was introduced into our home because there was chaos. No one was looking out for me. I mean, think about it. Why was this little girl out front, and this neighbor approached, invited me into his home, and no one noticed?
Okay, now I get it. So
And
you're
now
saying
I
because there was alcoholism,
Yes,
you were
I
not
mean-
being parented and protected.
Right, exactly. And I tell people today, watch your kids. Don't trust anybody. Because the enemy is just looking to invade your home and steal, kill, and destroy.
So how long did this go on, and when did you leave home? What happened to you in your teen years?
It was a passing off of sorts. It was. I say in my book, I don't know when it ended, when the abuse ended. It was a passing off. I became a consensual collaborator at that point. And something insidious about childhood sexual abuse is that the abused always feels guilty, like there's something that makes you feel like you were a part of it, because there are physical things that accompany that.
That's what's so particularly and clearly evil about it, is that you're
Yes.
abused and then somehow you condemn yourself. I mean,
You
it's the old story.
Right. So what do? You just keep doing it.
Yeah.
You keep repeating that thing.
So why is the book titled From Mafia Princess to God's Princess? At what point does mafia become part of the story?
Well, if you look at it like a staircase, like the one I came up on, it's one step at a time down. And so there were many things. And let me just clarify. God, at 12 years old, I gave my life to Jesus, but then I strayed.
So in the middle of all this madness, you had an opportunity to give your life to Jesus. How did that happen?
At a vacation Bible school. We lived next door to a church. And there wasn't a lot of outreach, but these kids came from out of town to hold a vacation Bible school, and they invited us. We were clearly a dysfunctional home. I mean, it was obvious. But they reached out to us and invited us, and I gave my life to Jesus, and I was baptized. And then there was no follow-up by anybody, so I just started going downhill from there. And I had... there's always predators. There's no lack of predators out there. And my father was also an entrepreneur, and so he had a car salesman and mechanic, and he had a lot of people over. So I ended up, long story short, having a relationship with a married man, and much older, when I was 15. And they sent me off to live with a relative, and that relative started... that he was married to my aunt, and he used me to make money, and it was a horrible experience, difficult to talk about, as you can imagine, because at that point now I think, okay, I'm 15, so I'm a grown-up, right? And so I made this decision to allow myself to be used, and so
You mean that this uncle prostituted you? Is that what you're saying?
in a sense, I guess you would call it like my aunt and uncle divorced, and so we were traveling around with him, and that was one of the things that the Lord showed me when I rewrote my book, that I need to no longer let these memories have power over me. And it's so difficult to look back at things, especially when you are, and some people think 15, well, you're a woman, you trafficked, we have the Jeffrey Epstein thing and all of that. And you think, oh, these are, and in my mind, I thought I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
I thought I was really together. I was 15.
Yeah.
I have two sons. When they were 15, they were kids.
Well, that's because 15-year-olds are kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you were trafficked by this uncle?
On a small scale.
Nonetheless.
And it was one of those memories that I was telling you about that you try to just forget.
Yeah.
And so revisiting it was not easy. But I remember money changing hands.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's just astonishing to me what people go through. The good news, though, the reason you're here is because this ends up having a beautiful
miraculous
ending. I mean, I'm not ready to go there yet in the story because I want you to lay down this foundation. But we'll be right back. Folks, I'm talking to Barbara Cueto, Cueto, From Mafia Princess to God's Princess. We'll be right back. Folks, welcome back. I'm talking to the author of From Mafia Princess to God's Princess, Barbara Cueto. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Actually, it's Cueto.
Cueto.
But you're good. We
Cueto.
usually get Cuerpo, Cuento, Cuto.
Cuervo.
Yeah, Cuervo.
Okay, so this is hard. The only good part about it is you're on the other side, and we're talking
Yes.
on the other side.
Yes.
But so what happened before you get involved in this mafia stuff? You were saying to me that even though you were going through this hell, God was showing up in your life.
Yes, he was. And it's hard to imagine because now I flash forward, I minister to people that are in drug and alcohol rehab, and I hear my story a lot and worse. I mean, a lot. And so I know if you're speaking to a room of people, probably at least a third or fourth of them have been hurt when they were children. So watch your kids diligently. As I said, I gave my life to the Lord, to Jesus, when I was 12 years old. And so after that, there were miracles that happened in my life, like God was saying, you may have left me, but I didn't leave you. And one of those was when I was lost in the forest in New Mexico. I was in the mountains of New Mexico. I went camping with some friends, and I wandered off. It's all in my book, but this.
But are you a teenager
shorts.
at this point, or in your 20s?
I was a teenager.
Teenager.
And I got lost. That was after the trafficked and came back. The married older man got me addicted to drugs and alcohol. I was drinking when I went to school. I was in speech and drama, so I would go do the plays like Toasted, and actually I won awards. So
wow, so you were
I don't know
you
how.
were acting.
I was acting.
And yet you were addicted.
I would improvise my lines. I mean, it was crazy.
But you were addicted to okay, so
I
now
got
you
on
find
speed.
yourself.
He got me on speed. He got me on alcohol because when you're dating an older man who could get these things, obviously it's easy for you to. And of course, when I discovered drugs and alcohol, I was like, oh yes.
Something
relief
to dull the pain.
Relief, and you don't remember now every second of your life, and you don't feel that nagging pain every minute of your life. And so obviously, I mean, if you have a toothache, what is the remedy? So this is a life ache that I had, and the remedy was at that time drugs and alcohol.
But I mean, it's like you lived 100 lives. I mean, so here you are, you're still a teenager. So you were saying that you were lost in the woods, you were camping and you were lost. Yeah.
I went to the mountains camping. First time I'd ever been to the mountains, and it's vast, but I didn't have any knowledge. I mean, one tree looks like the other, right? And I got in an argument with a young man that I went with, and he left me there. So I was like, okay, I'm going to give him some time to cool off. I surely have at least enough sense of direction to go back. But it was my first time in the mountains. Anyway, I ended up really lost. And I panicked at first, like anybody does. You panic, and then you just start going in every direction, and you realize every tree looks exactly alike. Every hill looks exactly alike. And at one point, I don't know how it happened, I just started relaxing. And I started remembering what it was like when my mother would sing me Christian songs, or these songs that I grew up knowing, and I started singing those to the Lord. And then he started conversing with me, just very not like in an audible voice, but in my heart. It was like I'm in this huge forest alone with God. And he comforted me, he gave me peace. It was remarkable, the sensation of being lost with God. And so nightfall came, though, and I say in my book it was more like my real life, it's dark and a lot of creepy things. I found a shelter and I slept there, and I probably prayed. I didn't feel God then. Like you don't feel God in the darkness, when you're living in the darkness. But the next day, I kept following the stream because I thought if I follow the stream, it'll lead me somewhere. I mean, I think you see that in movies. The stream always leads to civilization. And I didn't run into anybody, but I kept sensing this fellowship with God in the forest. And at one point, I started worrying about my parents, which Eric, I was a teenager. I think I was 18. And I never thought about my parents. I never cared or worried about them. My dad was sober at that point. It's miraculous, too. It's in the book. But at that point, I just sent up I was talking to him. I was conversing like I'm conversing with you. So I said, I'm really worried about my parents. I think I need to come home, as if I just come for a visit, It's like, I think I better go home, God. We've had a great time, but it's time to go home. And in that minute, I heard a voice in my head. And this I did hear, go up that hill. There was a mountain right there. The stream was here.
You heard an audible voice.
I heard a voice say, go up that hill. And so I was like, if I go up that mountain, if I go up that mountain, I'm going to be really lost, Lord.
Yeah.
But I obeyed.
Because you heard God's voice.
I just knew it wasn't me.
Wow.
I wouldn't have thought that.
Right.
So I started going up this big mountain, and when I reached the top of the mountain, there was a clearing, a big open clearing. And in that minute, the minute my foot touched that clearing, there was a helicopter overhead.
A helicopter?
Helicopter overhead.
So you were so lost, they sent a helicopter?
Yes. There was a search and rescue crew looking for me.
Wow.
And he said, on a loudspeaker, he said, "Are you Barbara Watkins?"
Are you serious?
No, I'm Grizzly Adams.
But think about it. If you had just been in the woods, they couldn't see you. And here you're on the top. Because
I stepped on that clearing. And I'm telling you, Eric, the minute my foot touched that clearing, that helicopter was overhead.
And you knew, obviously, that God was with you. And so this is, it's important to explain to people that things aren't black and white. Here you are living this life of sin and pain, and yet God is reaching out to you, especially during this moment.
Right.
And well, so that's a bright moment. But after this, of course, things don't go well. So,
but it was pivotal.
Yeah.
It was pivotal in my heart, I think, because I realized God was close by. That no matter how lost I got, He was with me. Okay, like we tend to look at God like, okay, this is it. You've messed up enough. That's like a parent might do. That's it. That I drew the line.
Right.
But God isn't like that. He is so patient, and I realized that and recognized it in my own life because He went to that great effort to spend some time with me.
That is amazing that out of everybody's nightmare, being lost, especially at that age, you don't know anything, and
I think it was familiar for me because I was terminally lost.
Yeah.
But there was a search and rescue, Native American men, women, and children that had gone to live, and they led me. They were pretty close, but I think I was headed in the opposite direction. So par for the course for me.
Wow. Okay, so what happens? How do we get to the Mafia Princess part?
After that, not long after that, you said it well, my life was like a lot of life crammed into this space. Not long after that, I ended up marrying a DJ. And I won't go into why or how. And we moved to Houston, Texas. He was a DJ, he was a pilot, but he had a terrible temper, abusive temper. He was not a nice person. And that's kind of the people you tend to gravitate toward. I don't know why. It's warped because those are the people that hurt you, and you just seem to want to punish yourself and continue punishing yourself. I don't know why that is.
But he was not involved in the mafia.
He was not. He was Jewish. So although there are, I guess.
There are Jewish mobsters, but.
Yes, I met those too.
So what happened after that?
We moved to Houston, Texas, and he lost his job because of his terrible temper. Then he told me, "You're going to have to get a job." And I said, I'd really never worked other than that, but I had never worked at a real job, and I didn't know what I could do. And he said, "I know where you can make a lot of money really fast, and you'll make tons of money." And I was like, "Well, why? This is my husband, right?" So I'm trusting him. And he took me to this club. It was called, I call it New York in the book. And it was a topless club. So I was shocked.
Your husband took you to work there.
He said, "You need to do this to make money."
You can make a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Nice guy.
And there's a lot of money in pornography. So. And he took me there, and the man who interviewed me was a retired magician, of all things. A nice guy, but, you feel like you're being looked at like, someone ready to buy a car.
Yeah, well, that's because you are.
I couldn't even have thought of doing that, as bad as I had been and the things had been in my life. I was saved at 12. So even though I didn't see the little princess in there, God saw her. And he somehow gave me a sense that somewhere in there she still existed. So I ended up going ahead and doing it.
somehow,
we didn't have a choice.
because you were so desperate.
We didn't have a choice.
And your husband's pushing you.
But I mean, I can't.
And this leads to the mafia part.
It was my choice.
Well, yeah, sure.
But yeah, it's like you get used to obeying men or suffering their wrath when you're raised as an alcoholic father.
That's what I hear in a lot of these horrible stories. We're gonna go to a break, folks. I'm talking to Barbara Cueto. The book is From Mafia Princess to God's Princess. Don't go away. Welcome back, folks. I'm talking to the author of From Mafia Princess to God's Princess. So now, Barbara Cueto, we get to the mafia part. How did that happen?
I was working in this topless club. Had to do enormous amounts of drugs to have the courage to do that. By the way,
you hear this a lot, right? That women who are in these things, they do drugs kind of to get through it. So
I think you've gotten used to it at that point, to just using drugs as a crutch.
Yep.
To do things that are impossible to think about. So I was working there, and this man used to come in regularly. Everyone respected. We called him Papa. And he was an older man, kind of salt and pepper hair, like yours. At that time, he was quite a bit older, very stocky, very large in life, even if he wasn't that tall. He was big. And eventually I found out he was the owner. And his name was Tony. Tony Palermo is what I call him. And he was the owner of the club. I was in awe of him because of just the presence he cast. He was in that sense awesome, that everyone had great respect for him. And he seemed like a nice man, and he would come in frequently. At one point, the manager that I spoke of convinced all of us, I don't know what happened, but he convinced all of us to go to another club to work, downtown Houston. And so we were all on board. We didn't think very much of it. And so we all went to this other club to work. And he had jobs all lined up for us and everything. Then one night, I see Tony sitting out there.
In the new club.
In the new club.
The one he doesn't own.
Right. And you never think you're doing this to somebody who has the power to have you removed from this planet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's and no morality that would stop him from doing it. But I don't, I'm young and dumb and I just seem to bounce through life. So we were at that other club, and he's just sitting there, and he was and I was scared, and I was like, what can I do? I went back and told one of the girls, what should I do? And they're like, well, see what he wants to drink. And so I did, and I was like, Papa, I'm really sorry about all of this. And he just like patted the seat, and he's like, sit here, BJ. He used to call me BJ. And I sat down, and he told me that, long story short, he didn't come there to have us all killed. He came there to woo me, I guess. He wanted to take me out of the club. Isn't that ironic that the mobster took me out of the club? And he took me home, and we eventually married.
Wow.
I thought I was in love with him.
Wow.
And
you were so young. You're half his age.
Right. I was 20.
You were 20?
Right.
And he's what, 48?
He was probably in his 40s. I don't even remember. Maybe he was 48.
I mean, I thought I read it, but anyway, the point is,
Maybe.
This is
It's possible.
So this
I don't
is
read my book
this
very
is an
much.
underworld figure. This is a
Yes.
criminal.
I found the girls always talked about, and the manager Chris, they talked about the fact that he was mafioso, and you don't really have to tell someone who's mafioso that someone's mafioso. They just cast that presence. They have an aura around
you get
them.
it.
You know, everybody knows.
It's not a halo.
Right.
So so how long were you in this life with this person?
Just a few years. His world was pornography. He owned bookstores, and back then it was like arcades and magazines and horrible, horrible stuff that people spend lots of money. It's a lie. It's a lie of the devil.
So that's how he's making his.
Oh, he
his
made tons of money,
dirty
hand over
money.
fist, and we counted it. We counted this money, and sometimes people would expire. That you'd hear about. And it's funny how you can go to that world and all of that becomes very natural to you, second nature. You hear, oh, so-and-so died in a mysterious car accident. It's kind of like politics today, just like you
so
hear about
you're
things
in this
that
world
happen.
and this becomes normal to you.
It was very normal to me. I mean, I don't know. But there again, remember we talked about that staircase. It was one step at a time to get me to the point where that could seem normal. Because now at this place that I'm at today in my life and in my walk with the Lord, it's impossible to believe I ever was that person. And if God had not asked me to write this book, and maybe not in the same voice to go up the mountain, but he did, I would have a hard time revisiting a lot of this. I mean,
well, you
want to tuck
forget
it away.
It's too painful.
But you use it for his glory.
But you're helping people by telling this story, because there are people going through similar things now, or they know people for sure. Well, it's why I wanted you on the program, because I said people need to know this stuff. People need to know what people suffer and what God can do.
That's right.
So when does God enter the picture? Is that during this period or after?
No, it's quite a ways after. We ended up getting divorced because and there are things like I said, you can't talk about the entire book. There are things that happened, and God showing up there, I believe, and miracles, that I don't know why God has been so good to me. I can look back at my life and say, thank you, God, for everything you let me go through. It's given me wisdom. It's given me hope. It's shown me what you can do. After that, I ended up moving back to El Paso after our divorce, and the FBI visited me there to ask about Tony and to tell me that this man had died, that was murdered, Chris, the manager, that he was murdered. And did I know who might have had reason to kill him? So I didn't tell him. Actually, I did tell him everything. That's a God moment, but you'll have to read the book or else we could go on forever. Yeah. Long life, Eric. So, and he was, and God rest his soul. You always hope that someone found the Lord before they were killed or died or whatever.
Well,
happened.
We have to go to another break. Folks, the book is From Mafia Princess to God's Princess, Barbara Cueto, my guest. Do not go away. Why would you? I'm talking to Barbara Cueto. The book is From Mafia Princess to God's Princess. There's so much in the story. I know you covered all in the book, but so you leave the life of living with this, being married to this mafia criminal.
Yes.
And then the FBI,
I loved him,
and then and then the FBI wants you to provide them information, and I guess you spill your guts. You tell them all that you know, which I'm guessing is a lot.
I think so. After we divorced, Tony would call me regularly and say, just to check on me.
Yeah.
And now I thought it was because he was having second thoughts or whatever, because I left him because he cheated all the time. But it's like, that's what we do. Don't ever expect to just hold me faithful. It's not going to happen. Yeah, you have to share me. But I couldn't deal with that. So, yes, the FBI came. I had remarried. I have a chapter in my book called Serial Marrier, because it just seemed like I wanted to make things right. I wanted to do things right. And there was only marriage to make it, legitimize it.
Right.
And so I was married to a veterinarian.
That seems sort of funny.
I know, isn't that
weird? To go from mafia porn king to veterinarian. Okay.
I know, it's crazy. I was crazy.
Yeah.
But I think I could fit into different circles, and obviously. And so at one point, the FBI came to see me, and actually several times. But one time they were like, "Did you know this man died? I told you all that. And do you know how?" And I thought about it, because they said, "We'll come back, think about it." And I did think about it. I thought, I've got to really come clean. I want to start fresh. I'm going to tell them everything I know about the businesses, somewhere in my name, about the money counting, about all the stuff that we did, all the cash that flowed through, about the beef he might have had with this guy, and then another guy they told me about that had died as well, but I didn't know anything about him. I knew him, but I didn't know how he might have passed away. And
you knew it was not peacefully.
And this is where God shows up again. You kind of gathered that. God showed up again. There are other times, but this specifically, I told them everything they wanted to know. Mm-hmm. And they said, because you don't have to I guess, do that if you were married. And I found out later. At the time, at the veterinary clinic, there was an intern working there that was going through veterinary school. He happened to be a tax attorney from New York City.
Wait. See, this sounds like the comedy version. You're working.
I know.
You're married to a veterinarian. At the vet's office is an intern who happens to be a New York City attorney? Tax attorney.
But he was an attorney. I mean, of all places.
That's not your typical
of
veterinarian's
all things.
intern, but go ahead.
But I didn't
Yeah.
even know that
Right,
then.
right.
But they saw these men coming in suits and talking to me for long periods of time. And so the second time they left, when I decided, they said, we're going to come back and record this. Do you mind recording what you just told us?
Yeah.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
come back. I'll tell you everything you
Yeah,
want to know.
yeah.
And I walked him out. And so Alan, he asked me, he's like, who is that? I mean, it obviously looked strange. And I told him, I told him the whole story. And he said, are you crazy? I lived in New York City,
Yeah.
and every day we saw headlines or
Yeah.
whatever at
Yeah.
that time. I don't know if it's still true today.
Yeah.
And he said of people that just want to come clean about their past with
Yeah.
the mafia.
Yeah.
He's like, you don't have to say a word by law.
Right.
You just tell them you don't know anything when they come back.
Yeah.
And I did. But to me, and I said at that point, I will never tell this story again unless God himself tells me to. And I didn't until he did. In fact, when I wrote my book, my husband, current husband, the one that God gave me, that I should have asked all along, because God knew exactly who I needed to be with, he didn't know about any of this. And it hurt us deeply. So I don't do this out of fun and games. It's been difficult, and only to serve God that I've said it.
Yeah.
So flash forward, I did get married. I had a couple of kids, 2 sons I'm very proud of. And I obviously got divorced again. I was a mess. I was also a rock and roll singer. I sang in clubs. I'm a professional singer. And so I was, you don't do that either sober. So it was a mess, and I was a mess. And so that marriage didn't survive either.
And so at what point does God come into the picture where you are now? In other words, you're a dramatically different person. When did that happen?
Well, thank you for that. That's what I hope that people will say when they've heard my story.
Yeah.
That you're a dramatically different person, because that's what God does. He makes someone like I was, and he makes them new. He doesn't recycle.
Well, that's how he sees it. There's certain people that don't believe that people can change that much, but that's not true. God does we have to be blunt, it is a supernatural, miraculous work.
It is.
And in some ways you're the same person, and in some ways you are completely new.
Right.
And that's the part that God's interested in.
Right.
So how did that happen for you after all this?
And let me just say, at this point, I was addicted to cocaine now, too, on top of everything else. It was always uppers and coke, and Tony got me addicted to cocaine. I shouldn't say he got me. He introduced me to it, and I fell in love with cocaine.
Yeah.
So I became a strong user of that, and somehow God gave me my babies still, despite how much and they were miracles for me. They're miracles anyway. So at one point in 1991, my mom, who was involved in the Charismatic Catholic Renewal, and I don't know if you've heard of that.
Of course.
Pentecostal.
I went to a charismatic conference in maybe it was 1990 in Indianapolis, and about half of the folks there were charismatic Catholics. It was an amazing thing.
It introduced the Holy Spirit. That movement introduced Jesus, the Bible. I mean, things that as a Catholic growing up I had never heard of. I never really knew.
Well, most people haven't heard of it, and it's pretty important. So
Very
so
important.
at this point, you hear about God again through your mother.
So I went there again. I mean, I'm cutting out parts that are significant in the story, because I went to the Pecos Benedictine Monastery, where I had been as a girl, and God had spoken to me very deeply there, very personally. And don't think I was this person looking for miracles on every corner. He knew what a hard sell I was. So the things he did were like huge, bigger than life.
Right.
And so I went back. At the time, I wanted to stay at the monastery when I was, I think, 15. No, it was right around the 18 Lost in the Forest period. And I wanted to stay at the monastery, and the abbot wouldn't let me. I knew I had found where God was, and I wanted to stay there. Can you imagine if I had?
Oh my gosh. Well, this is the mystery. We'll be right back, folks, talking to Barbara Cueto. Don't go away. Welcome back. Final segment with my guest, Barbara Cueto, from Mafia Princess to God's Princess. So, We're getting to the good part, Barbara,
Yes.
where God comes into your life to stay.
Yes.
So your mother, as you said, after all these years, she finds
she
God.
found Jesus, she'll tell you.
Yeah.
Through the Catholic charismatic
Right.
renewal
Right.
at the time. So she brought him home. We
Yeah.
all got to experience that.
Yeah.
But of course, the damage had been done. My father, by this time, was sober, again, miraculously. As I was telling you earlier, God didn't just drop miracles left and right because he, God is present with us. And if we look and ask, he'll do these things in our lives. That's what I've discovered through these years. So, okay, I was back at the Pecos Benedictine Monastery where I had wanted to stay before. It broke my heart they wouldn't let me stay. I thought it had something to do with
When you were
someone
18.
knowing who I was.
But isn't that interesting,
you
though?
always feel like...
But that's so interesting that we think about that. But we'll put that to the side.
I don't even know if you think about it. You just always feel like
Right.
everyone can see what's going on. And
which should be the very reason they would welcome you, because, your heart desires not
Right.
to be that person.
And on
But-
the contrary, that you think they see that, but God really does see it. And he goes, I love you anyway, baby
Yeah.
girl.
Yeah.
You're everything to me. And he reaches out to show you that, and over and over again if you're a knucklehead like me. So I went back to the monastery, and everything had changed. It was as if God came and met me there. The same abbot, I'm a musician, so he came right up and approached me. How are you? I'm a musician too, and he sought me out in a crowd of 100 or so, and just presented this picture of God to me after all these years. All the food was my favorite. It was just incredible. And then one night they had a healing service, and I had come with a throbbing toe. It was like I had injured my toe.
You had injured your foot.
I could barely
Okay.
walk.
So you go to a healing
And
service.
I went to a healing service, and I thought, I'm going to go up there and pray that God will heal my toe.
Yeah.
But in that moment, when I stepped forward to get my toe healed, he healed my toe. But that wasn't the miracle. He healed my heart. It was like scales fell off my heart. It was as if all of a sudden, it was like, why are you hurting? Why? I forgave everybody. It was just like from one minute to the next.
So that it's so interesting because everybody's story is different. You're saying that you go there for a physical healing.
For physical healing.
And you get the physical healing?
I did get the physical healing.
And how did you know?
That didn't even blow me because
did you
it was
feel something?
right away. I could walk. I could walk normally.
So that must have amazed you. But you're saying somehow simultaneously all this other stuff is happening. And how does it feel? Are you experiencing? Some people talk about feeling like energy, or was it just you just suddenly felt
just peace? It's like I was in the eye of the storm all my life. And all of a sudden, you know how you see videos of tornadoes and afterwards everything's just calm.
Yeah.
That's how I felt.
Yeah.
I was just calm. I had joy.
And how did
you don't know,
know,
like pot gave me joy. Pot is an artificial means of joy, you know. That's Satan's counterfeit to God's joy.
Yeah.
And that used to give me joy. I'd smoke a lot of pot. And first thing in the morning, first time I smoked pot, it was the first time I felt joy.
This is why we have to have mercy and grace and love for people struggling with addictions, because we have no idea the pain that they're anesthetizing. So when this happened in this at this healing service, how did you know that it would be permanent? Because it has been permanent.
It has been permanent, but it wasn't. First of all, you see that God did something that you can't do. Even healing a toe, you'll say it. Well,
it's called a miracle.
It's a huge miracle, but you tend to look at the physical miracles. God saw that I needed something more.
Right.
He's like, okay, you humbled yourself, you came up, you asked for help, and I'm here. And so after that, I didn't just immediately stop doing things. I kept, your habits are habits, and you have to work at getting rid of them just like you worked at getting them. Yeah. So I tried to... I would still party and do all the things because I wrote with my friends. We were songwriters, and we'd get together and just...
You were still in that lifestyle, but you had this experience that you knew was real.
Right. And so the pièce de résistance, if you will, is one day I was laying in the park near my mother's house, and I was just laying there, and I was just loving the sun on my face and everything. And I was asking the Lord, because once you keep on doing that, when you've experienced something like that, it's not right. Now all of a sudden, all the things you did without thinking about, they hurt you spiritually. It's like, I don't want to hurt you anymore. God, this person living inside of me, I don't want to hurt you anymore. So I was laying in the park, and then I had my eyes closed, and I felt the sun get really, really bright. And then I was like, I could tell even under my closed lids. And so afterwards, I got up to go back, and I was like, Lord, was that you? Was that present, that sun? Was that you? And then I heard that voice again. I heard when I was in the mountains. And I was like, first I said, how can I follow you? I want to follow you so desperately. Please show me how to do it. Show me how to do it. And then that voice said, stop drinking and doing drugs and smoking for 120 days, and then you can follow me. But I was like that rich ruler in the Bible, that he thought he was following God, but he couldn't give up his treasure, and that was my treasure. And then when I was leaving the park, I was like, was this really you, God? Jesus? Was this really you? And there was an ice cream truck circling the park at that time. The song that they were playing was my favorite song of all time. What child is this? It was like in that clanky little thing. Da, 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 as I was singing it,
on
what
an
child
ice
is
cream
this?
truck.
This is Christ the Kid.
On an ice cream truck.
On an ice cream truck. So, and people will tell you that was a coincidence or whatever. I never heard that ice cream truck again.
Oh, can I tell you? I've lived a pretty full life. I've heard a lot of ice cream trucks. I've never heard any ice cream truck play anything near that. That is amazing. So that day you took this next step.
That day I started on the quest to trying. God led me to Teen Challenge. I don't know if you've heard of
I know Teen Challenge. Well, listen, my goodness, the man who performed my wedding with my wife 25 years ago was Don Wilkerson, who headed up Teen Challenge.
Yes, David's
and my
brother.
wife and I met at David Wilkerson's church, so we know all about this. So we only have a couple of minutes left. So after you got clean and sober and are walking with God, you
went to
are
AA
now
too.
And went to AA.
Because I said I would never do that.
Right.
I'd do anything else but that.
but you are now involved in helping people dealing with addiction.
That's
so tell us about that, because we just got a
call.
couple of minutes. I want to hear about that.
BarbaraCueto.com, Barbara, CUETO.com, to learn more about what I'm doing. But
BarbaraCueto.com, CUETO. Go ahead.
Yes, and because so many miraculous things happened 3 times. If you read the book, you'll not just lost in the forest or being saved.
Yeah.
But I host in the mountains of New Mexico, where I live, a retreat for men and women women in alcohol addiction. And we bring them up there because former addicts have something that most people don't realize, that we have fought. We are courageous. We'll do anything for our addictions. I will crawl over broken glass on my bare knees to get to I would have to my drug dealer. I was only afraid of running out, really.
Right.
But so we have that quality about him. I feel like the Lord has asked me to try to instill that, to bring people to Jesus and turn that around and use it for his glory. To use, because Jesus said, in order to come after me, you have to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. And so I think anyway, it's the Warrior Princess Retreat, to make warriors for God.
This is just
and I have a Bible study.
Such a happy ending. I'm glad you have a website so people can, because there's so much more to this, and I want people who are interested to know they can go to Barbara Cueto, CUETO, BarbaraCueto.com, and the book is
or Facebook,
From Mafia Princess to God's Princess. So we've got like 25 seconds left. You have 2 sons. Are you married now?
Yes. Very happily.
And
over 30 years.
Wow. God bless you.
Yes.
This is just, now and again we do these Miracle Monday stories because people need to hear what people have been through. They think they're the only one, or they don't think there's hope for them. You've been through just so much. And to be sitting with you here and to hear about this happy ending, it's just
praise God.
Wonderful what God is doing. So Barbara Cueto, thank you. God bless you.
Thank you.
And folks, the book is From Mafia Princess to God's Princess. Go to BarbaraCueto.com.
Folks, you will not believe how much you save at MyPillow.com when you use the code ERIC. Yay! Thanks. Prescription Dispensing Labs is a national licensed pharmacy specializing in personalized prescription and natural medicine. The pharmacists at PD Labs are credited with formulating unique nasal sprays for the dreaded brain fog and a leader in uncovering new compounds to improve your health. PD Labs Pharmacy prides itself on innovation and amazing customer service that show dedication to your health. Today, everyone needs a choice in their healthcare. Call them today at 888-909-0110 to experience true healthcare. Ask for Ray. Remember, you have a choice in healthcare.